Bonjour tout le monde. Good morning, everyone. I hope you've had time to sign in this morning. My name is Paul Bennett, and I'm a volunteer with the Ottawa branch of the National Association of Federal Retirees. First, I would like to begin by recognizing the First Nations on whose traditional lands our branch office is located. This is unceded traditional territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people. On behalf of the branch, I am pleased to welcome you to today's session entitled, How Can Supportive Smart Home Technology Facilitate Aging in Place? I want to give a warm welcome to our presenter today, Dr. Frank Knoefel, who is the Chair in Primary Health Care Dementia Research with the Bruyère Institute and the University of Ottawa Brain and Mind Research Institute. His research focuses on the use of technology to help older adults to age in place. Today, Dr. Knoefel will be talking about what role smart home technology such as Google Home and Amazon Alexa can play in facilitating aging in place. Thank you for being with us this morning, Dr. Knoefel. Veuillez noter que cette session sera présentée en anglais, mais la participation bilingue est toujours encouragée. I want to give a special welcome to anyone here who is not yet a member of the association. We hope these webinars will inspire you to join us, and to our members, we hope that these sessions will encourage you to maintain your membership. Finally, if you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A box throughout the session. Dr. Knoefel will respond to them during the question and answer period at the end of the presentation. And he has indicated that he'd be happy to stay a few minutes at the end if there are more questions than we have originally allotted time for. That's all from me right now, as I'm going to turn the presentation over to Dr. Knoefel.
Good morning. Thank you for that kind introduction, Paul, and thank you for having invited me to join you this morning. And I will share my slides. Paul, can you see those? Are we ready to go?
Hold on, just let me check. Yes, we can see them. We can see
Perfect. So this morning, my objectives are to talk about some of the elements of a supportive smart home, how the technology can support older adults with various conditions associated with aging, and then talk a little bit about ethical and public policy issues. And so the outline is exactly those elements. I'll provide a little bit of a background and then maybe talk a little bit about the future as I see it. And so for background, I just want to say that it always takes a village to do this kind of work. And Dr. Gubran and myself started this research 20 years ago, and we've been fortunate to have lots of clinicians and engineers, industrial designers, and healthcare management type people join us. We've had tons of students and a large research team, and I thank them all for their contributions to our work. And just to show sort of how things evolve in this work, typically we start at Carleton University in the engineering department. So in the Minto building and in the Arise building, we develop prototypes of technology. And then we bring them to the Elisabeth-Bruyere hospital where I work at the memory clinic. And we trial it in our smart apartment on the 4th floor. And then driving technology is used on the 2nd floor in our driving simulator lab. So this is a view of our smart apartment. In 2004, we were able to share this space. So this is an actual apartment built in the hospital for patients transitioning to home. So after having had rehab for weeks and months, living independently all of a sudden would be a challenge. So there was this apartment where they would stay for the weekend. If they did all right, then we knew they could transition back to homes. And this, of course, is a great environment to put in sensors and technology because real people then are able to trial it. And I want to acknowledge AgeWell, a network of centers of excellence that helped fund our research. AgeWell here, as you can see, 37 million in funding, 300 plus researchers, and importantly, over 5,000 engaged older adults who took part in this work. Couple of definitions. I just want to, so that we're speaking the same language. When I think about homes, I sort of think of three categories. A monitoring home would be a home that many of you would have. You might have an alarm system in your home, and it has motion sensors and door sensors, that kind of thing. And essentially, if you leave to go on vacation, you turn the alarm on, and then if there's a door opening or some kind of movement in the house, the alarm company is notified and they come and see who's in the house. So think about turning that upside down. And now we want movement in the house because we want to make sure the older adult is functioning well. So we want them to transition within the different rooms. We want them to go outside. So this would be a monitoring home that can monitor these kinds of activities. A smart home then is, as we mentioned in the introduction, it's sort of the Google Home, the Amazon Home, where it recognizes the voice and words, and you can use commands and interact with the machine and ask about the weather, tell it to turn on the lights, turn up the volume on the stereo, etc. The third category, the one I'm most interested in, is what I would call the supportive smart home. So this is a monitoring home that has speakers and smart devices, but more importantly, it provides feedback to the person living there about how things are going and can, in real time, improve an activity. And we'll talk about that a little later. Activities of daily living, just to categorize them a little bit, there's sort of three types. Basic activities of daily living are those that are taking care of our personal bodies, so dressing, bathing, toileting, feeding ourselves. Instrumental activities of daily living are the ones where we interact more with society, so shopping, making meals, paying bills. Enhanced activities of daily living are more for enjoyment of life, so going to sports events, doing education, and that kind of thing. And finally, just to distinguish what can come out of a sensor and a smart home or supportive smart home is two things: data, which is simply numbers and measurements, but which by themselves may not have a lot of meaning. And of course, information, which is when we organize the data to have meaning and so that we can do an action. So why are we talking about age tech? Well, you know very well that the demographics have changed. We've gone from lots of young people supporting few older people to virtually the same number of people in Canada under 15 and over 65. So it's a big shift. We know that older adults prefer not to be told where to live. They want to live where they choose to live. That requires human resources, and we know that especially since COVID, but even before that, we've had a shortage, and it's only going to get worse as more people age. The number of people, we won't be able to hire enough people to provide all the home care we need. So this is sort of the pressing issues that are the why on the age tech. The other thing is the amount of information we can collect. So technology in the home can collect information a lot more frequently than I can at the clinic. So I see patients at the memory clinic in 6 months, maybe a year later, and that's not a lot of information. If there was data at home, I would have a lot more to base my decisions on. So here we're going to plot two sets of data. So here you'd agree that there's fluctuations up and down. So let's say this is someone typing emails, and we're looking at the complexity of the words they're using. And of course, if I'm typing in a birthday greeting to my grandchild, it might be here. If I'm typing a professional email to my colleagues, it might be up here. So, that we're going to have some fluctuations over time. And then this might be another person. And while there are fluctuations up and down, there seems to be a trend overall into using simpler language. Now, let's assume that I'm also seeing these people at the clinic, but I only see them once a year. And now let's say that the first time I see this person, they score very well on their memory test. The second time I see them, they've slipped a little bit. And the third time I see them, they've slipped even more. So my interpretation at the clinic with 3 tests is that they're deteriorating cognitively. But of course, in real life, they're fluctuating about a mean, and they're actually pretty stable over 2 years. Similarly, or conversely, if I have a test measurement here, another one over here, another one over here, this person, I'd be thinking they're pretty stable, when in fact, they are deteriorating. So frequency of data points does matter clinically, and so technology can definitely provide a benefit there. So I'm going to take an imaginary person. This person does not exist. I apologize for all the LeBlancs out there, but I just picked a random person, Alex LeBlanc, former Assistant Deputy Minister in Transport Canada. He's an 85-year-old widower living alone, and he has osteoarthritis, some difficulty walking. Occasionally on bad days, he'll have difficulty even getting out of bed. Sometimes it's hard to get his legs over the edge of the tub to take a shower, and often standing for a half hour to prepare a meal is a challenge. So how do we know how he's doing? If I ask Mr. LeBlanc, he's going to say, oh, everything's going well, everything's fine, I'm doing well. If I ask his daughter, she might be saying, oh my gosh, over the last 6 months, there's been really, things have been getting a lot worse. I don't know when the last time was he took a bath or a shower. I'm really worried. So how do we know? And so that, of course, is the role of technology, or the one I'm proposing. And so now, how do we make up a supportive smart home? So this is sort of a gestalt picture of a supportive smart home. And so you have sensors in the home. And so you might have ones measuring vital signs. You might have some sleep quality sensors. You might have a weight sensor. And then you might have ones measuring instrumental activities of daily living, so computer use, taking medications, using appliances. You might have some that are specific to mobility. Ultimately, you need some kind of hub in the home that collects the data from these sensors, sends it to the internet, to the cloud, and then there's some kind of analysis. And then to be supportive, then of course we need to provide information feedback to someone, ideally the resident, possibly family members, home care organizations, or clinicians like myself, if we're looking at cognitive activities over time. So let's break it down. So sensors, we can have, we divided them up into 3 groups, low cost, medium cost, and high cost sensors. Low cost sensors would be like a simple door sensor, a motion sensor, a temperature sensor, that kind of thing. Medium cost sensor, so we're talking over $100 now. It might be a scale that's connected to the internet, computer use, medications, video cameras. And then there's the high cost sensors. They might be high cost because of the actual technology, but it might be the installation. So for water flow, for instance, the sensor itself isn't that expensive, but you have to cut the pipes, you have to put the sensor in, close her up, connect the technology. And so it becomes an expensive exercise. Radars, thermal cameras, these are high cost sensors. And so here's some pictures, of course, just a motion sensor, a door latch sensor, temperature sensor, camera, scale. And this is a bit more raw, but it's a microphone array, and you see all these little microphones, and they're arranged in such a way so that they can measure direction of sound. So we could differentiate maybe which cupboard is being opened by the sound that it makes. So we've got a sensor, it generates data. So there's a lot of things we need to think about, and one of them is sampling rate. So let's just take a door sensor. And so a steady sampling rate would be that we simply check in every so often, let's say every 5 minutes, to see if the door is open or closed. And then, of course, an alternate way of measuring would be to say, don't tell me what the sensor is doing except when it changes. So I'm assuming it's closed until it says, now I'm open and now I'm closed again. So already we have decisions to make about how we're going to sample. And just to give you an idea, so a door sensor, a simple magnetic switch that's sampled every 5 minutes would give 1,000 bytes of information in an hour. Another way of monitoring the front door would be with a video camera. And if we said, let's just leave it on all the time and generate data, what we get is 360 million bytes of data in an hour. Of course, you can imagine if we have multiple cameras, multiple homes, we're generating quite a bit of data that way. And a lot of it, of course, is irrelevant because I don't want to see a picture of the front door in real time. I don't need to see that. What I want to know is when there's a change, right? So if we take the door sensor, the very simple open close door sensor, and we do it every 5 minutes, we get about 2,000 reports in a day. If we say, no, only tell me when it changes, and someone leaves the house 7 times, let's say go outside, work in the garden, come back in, go outside, go shopping, come back. So if you leave the house 7 times, that would only generate 28 reports rather than looking through 2,000 reports, looking for every time there's a change in that data. Then there's data analysis, and it might seem trivial. You might say, well, that's easy. We just define things and then off where we go. But let's say we define a week as Monday morning, 1 minute after midnight to Sunday night, midnight. And we want to count bed exits. Well, now we'll have a day that starts at 01 and ends at 2400. But now the number of bed exits in that period will actually represent 2 different nights, right? It'll be the morning, so 2 a.m. is the end of the first night, and then 10 p.m. is going to be the beginning of the next night. So counting bed exits in a day is kind of weird. So maybe we need to define it as being noon to noon our week so that we can actually say, anytime they go to bed after noon, we'll call that the beginning of, well, either an afternoon nap or the beginning of night, let's say from 7 p.m. on. And then it goes continuously until 7 a.m., 8 a.m., 9 a.m. until they get out of bed. Now we can talk about the number of bed exits actually in one night, which of course is a completely different measure. The other thing to think about is, other than definition, again, the sampling rate. And here I just gave 2 examples. Sample rate will affect precision. So let's say someone got out of bed at 23:04 and got back to bed 7 minutes later at 11:11. So if we're sampling every 5 minutes, at 2300, they're in bed. At 23:05, they're out of bed. At 23:10, they're out of bed. And 23:15, they're back in bed. So we have twice out of bed. It's a 5-minute sampling rate. So we'll estimate that they're out of bed for 10 minutes. It was 7, not bad, but not that precise either. If we sample every 3 minutes, now 2300 in bed, 23:03 in bed, 23:06 out, 23:09 out, 23:12 in. Now we have 2 times 3 minutes. And of course, now we're closer. We have 6 minutes of bed exit, which is closer. And of course, the more frequently we're going to measure, sample the data, the more precise we're going to be, but the higher the cost in data transmission and data analysis. Power requires, there's 2 ways of thinking about power: the power of the processor, but also the power of electricity that we actually need. Of course, it depends on the amount of data we're analyzing. So again, a door sensor would require less power than a video. And again, if we think about hundreds of homes, this matters. So we can put a small processor into the home so that we do some processing locally. And what that does, it reduces the amount of data that goes out. So instead of going, open, 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 close, 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 open, 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 close, 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 and which is a lot of data, we can simply say it opened at 12:05, it closed at 12:35, it reopened, right? So it would be processing locally and less data going out. On the other hand, we could have, but that requires a computer on site, and that's an expense. On the other hand, we can do all the processing regionally. So we can say, look, just put the sensors in the house and shoot it all into the internet and then analyze it in one big computer regionally. So less expense in the house, that's great. But it means that we're going to be transmitting a whole whack of data. So we need a lot of big pipes to send this data down. And the receiving center needs to have a huge data storage facility and data analysis capacity. So where we analyze data matters, and likely it'll require some kind of balance of local and regional. So when we think about actually converting the data into information and the information into an action, we need to define, and the way we would do it is we define normal first. So we look at a baseline of activity. So here we have our gentleman getting out of bed 1 to 3 times a night to go to the bathroom. And so that's fine. We do that for a couple of weeks. We see what his average and range is. And then we need to define, okay, what's going to set off an alarm? So let's say it's 4 times and up getting out of bed. So that's fine. So now if he gets up 4 times or more, we notify him in the morning. So we need an action. We might notify him and say, hey, is everything okay? We noticed you got up 4 times last night, which is unusual for you. You might say, yeah, I had some tea before bed and that was a mistake. So I peed a lot more and everything's cool. And if the next night he gets up once again, cool. But if it's 4, then 5, then 6, now there's probably something going on, medication change, an infection, whatever. And we might want to notify a caregiver and maybe a professional. And of course, reliability is really going to matter, right? So if we have a fall detection device and it mistakes someone lying on the sofa for someone lying on the floor, no one's going to appreciate, being woken at 2 in the morning saying your mom's lying on the floor, you running over there and visiting and finding her sleeping on the sofa. Those false positives are going to make you turn off the device and not use it anymore. Similarly, someone who's lying on the floor and the machine thinks they're lying on the sofa, that's equally bad because it's a false negative. And now we're going to sue the company because our loved one was lying on the floor all night. So the reliability is going to be really important. So it's that we have to design it so that we're likely to get the correct information. So just to summarize the sequence, we have sensors, cheap, moderate, expensive. They generate data, motion or pressure or an image. And that data can be interpreted as being now providing information. There's someone in the room, there's someone in the bed, and if the pressure fluctuates, maybe we can detect some breathing rate. And then the images, maybe we can interpret walking or falling. And then the supportive smart home, of course, has an action. So it's dark, someone has gotten up, and so the light goes on to help them find the way to the bathroom. Or in an institution, someone who's at risk of falling, they get out of bed, we notify the nurse right away. And similarly, notifying the family if someone has fallen. All right, so those are the elements of a supportive smart home. Let's go back to our case and give some concrete examples. So Mr. LeBlanc, we identified with his arthritis. He has some difficulty walking and occasionally has difficulty getting out of bed. So let's start with the mobility sensor. And this is work from 2005 to about 2015. So this is a pressure sensor, and you can see it goes on the bed. And it measures the pressure in multiple points. And of course, this was old technology. You see a wire coming out of it. Of course, nowadays we'd have a wireless technology, but in those days, that's what we had. And so here's one of our students, and she's sitting on this bed sensor. And you can see her hips here. And then she puts her hands down in preparing to get up off the bed, and you can see the pressure. And then she lifts off, so her hands are still on the bed, but her legs are off. And so, of course, we can graph this. So this is the pressure of the hips going down, the hands going up, and then going down. And we could qualitatively look at some real transfers. So these are real older adults whose data we were allowed to collect. And so here you see a little dip. And this turns out it was someone who was just repositioning themselves, getting to the edge of the bed, getting ready to get up. So that's great. Here's someone who actually rocked back and to get up. So they were having a little bit more difficulty getting up from the bed, and so did a rocking motion. And then here's someone who actually failed. So they getting off the bed, but then they fell back onto the bed and then required a second shot at it. So you can imagine that if this is a person over time, you can see, we could assume that Mr. Leblanc's arthritis is getting worse, his joints are getting worse, and he's having more difficulty getting out of bed. And in this case, maybe we can do rehab before he falls and breaks his hip rather than after. And of course, as you can plot data over time. So this is a circular plot, and every circle is 24 hours. And these are concentric circles, then subsequent days. So day one all the way to a month worth of data. And it's a 24-hour clock here. And so here you can see the light blue is when this is a case where a person living with dementia and a partner, care partner. So here, the person with living with dementia typically goes to bed. That's the light blue color, sort of 9-ish. And then you can see here, the partner gets to bed around 11-ish. And in the morning, you've got the opposite. The person, the caregiver gets up early, takes their shower, gets breakfast ready before the person living with dementia gets up. And for nighttime activities, you can see that here by 1 o'clock, sort of on a typical night, they will have been to the bathroom their first time. And this allows us to establish a pattern. And of course, if there was a solid ring of red, we'd be knowing they're getting up way more in this particular period than normal. And we'd be able to see if there was a week that they had a bladder infection, we'd see a much more solid band, like this band here, which is when there was a power failure in the device in this particular home. But so you can see the sort of patterns. So getting out of bed was one thing. Walking around the house is another. And so here you have motion sensors attached to the ceiling. They have a very narrow cone of view. And so you can see here, as you're walking underneath them, you'd be triggering the first one, the second one, the third one, the fourth one. So you can sort of imagine you can measure gait speed indirectly, right? So you get a sense of how long does it take to trigger all 4 sensors. And that can be related to gait speed. And of course, the worse my arthritis is, the slower I am going to be crossing under these sensors. So this is called gait line, and then it's a measure again of how his arthritis is doing. This is the 2023 version of gait analysis, a company we're working with, UltimView. And it's a very special camera. It converts the image that it takes for the person into a stick figure. So it never shows a person. The data coming out of this camera is only stick people. So obviously privacy protecting, but also gives you an idea of what's happening. So again, this is one of our students. She set the camera up in her home and in the hall, and you can see here she's coming down the hall. And so from there, we can detect walking activity and various positions. And so the company has worked out a pattern where you see sort of a person crumpled on the ground, and that looks like someone that has had a fall. So they do have that ability right now to notify families if it looks like there's been a fall. So we've talked about mobility for Mr. Leblanc. The next thing is the activities of daily living we had identified. And we'd said, is he having a regular shower or not? And, sort of indirectly monitoring, again, the arthritis. So now we can take our $2 temperature and humidity sensor, literally $2, stick it on the wall in the bathroom, and we can monitor the humidity. And so this work we did in partnership with Esprit AI, that's a new startup here in Ottawa. And so this, you can see here, the baseline humidity, 11, 12, 1, 130, it's stable. And then at just before 2 o'clock, the humidity starts to rise. And I'm assuming here we had about a 20-minute shower. We open the shower door, the humidity keeps increasing even though we don't have water running anymore. And then gradually then the humidity dissipates. So clearly, if the humidity in the bathroom doubles, chances are that we've had a shower and or a bath, not much else that can explain that kind of change in humidity. So it is now possible for us to have a sense of, Mr. LeBlanc's hygiene, and again, related to his ability to get in and out of the tub. Making meals was the other thing we were concerned about. So going back to 2012, and again, you see a wired solution in those days. We did this study on smart fridges. And so we had a simple switch, a magnetic switch, connected to a box. In the box, we had a small processor, we had a speaker. Reason being is older adults like it when they see the purpose of the technology beyond what we are trying to measure. So in this case, we gave it to older adults and said, look, if you open the fridge and then the phone rings and you're distracted, you may forget to close the fridge door, and that may spoil your food. So you'll get a verbal reminder after a minute, the fridge door is still open. And then a minute later, if you haven't closed it, it'll say the fridge door is still open. And so the older adult said, okay, that's cool, a talking fridge, no one has it, I'll be the first in the building. And in the meantime, of course, for us, we were looking at fridge use to see if we can, again, establish baseline data and then be able to determine if something was going awry. So you can see clearly that this is a typical trimodal pattern. So 3 big uses a day. And so this is typical person opening the fridge as expected for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then an afternoon snack and occasionally maybe a snack before bedtime. Clearly, if this person didn't open the fridge door, for a full day or 2 days, we'd have to be concerned about, their health. Maybe they haven't been able to get out of bed, or they don't have the energy to be up in the kitchen. We are also concerned about what they're eating. So it's one thing to make a sandwich, it's another thing to make a meal and use the stove. So again, we can use our simple $2 sensor and place it above the stove. And again, with Esprit, we did this work, and I apologize, it's a bit pale, but you can see clearly here at 11 o'clock, there's a steep rise in the temperature above the stove. And then the stove is turned off, and then it takes a bit of time for it to cool off back to baseline. But so we can easily determine if there's been stove use in a particular day and how many times in a particular week. And again, if typically we use the stove for dinner and we skip one day, we might not panic. But if there's been no stove use for a week, we might wonder about how diet may have changed. The 2023 version of this technology is using infrared cameras. And so this is, again, our smart apartment. And there, you can't see the camera. It's just up here off out of view. It's aiming down at the surface of the stove. And you can see this is the image produced by the camera. And you can see there's heat coming off the stove around the edge here. Then you see the pot itself, the circular object, the pan, I should say, that is heating up. And then you see this black spot in the middle. That's the piece of meat that has just been added to the frying pan. So it's cold. So now, after a few minutes, it'll warm up. We might flip the meat and then the hot side will be up. So we are teaching computers, so doing machine learning, to teach them to identify when meat is being flipped. And again, this is getting more into the details of a meal. Turning on the stove is one thing, using it for meat, and we can drill down more and more into the activity. So a supportive smart home, for instance, might have a number of sensors. And let's say we want to boil potatoes. So normally we would take the pot out of a certain cupboard, we would add water, we would add the potatoes, we would put it on the stove. Let's say that this person has mild memory loss and forgets to add water, puts the pot on the stove with the potatoes, turns on the stove. Now the machine could say, aha, we've missed the step, no water has run. We'll ask Monsieur Leblanc if he would like to add water to the potatoes and thereby prevent the potatoes from burning and potentially worse outcomes. So you can see how you integrate variety of sensors, and then you can correct or improve the activities. Of course, this is all wonderful, but there are ethics and public policy to consider. So ethics, the basic ethics, at least from a clinician's point of view, is always do good, minimize the amount of harm. So in the use of sensors, it seems like it's all good. So let's say we want to use that pressure sensor on the bed. The reason is we want to be able to detect if they don't come back to bed in the middle of the night. They might have fallen in the bathroom. We don't want to find them on the floor, 7 hours later. We want to catch it in real time. So clearly there's an intended good here. However, the model that we had with the wire, if the wire came out from under the mattress and the person tripped on it, that's actually causing harm, right? We were actually making things worse. Without the sensor, they wouldn't have fallen. Obviously, that's a very concrete type of potential harm. There's all kinds of other potential harm, including, of course, harm to my self-esteem. And so that gets more challenging. And so it leads us to sort of this next group of issues, which is autonomy, informed consent, and capacity. So the autonomy part of it is I can decide for myself. I can choose if I want a technology or not. The informed consent part already starts getting a little bit more complicated because, as I've tried to show you, these are complex devices. These are complex sensors. They have sampling rates. The data gets packaged and gets sent, and there's computers that analyze the data. So what is informed consent in that context? If I'm a clinician and I say, look, I want to monitor your cognitive abilities using this sensor, and you ask me what's the sampling rate, I might not know. So does that informed consent? If I don't know, who your data carrier is it TELUS or Bell, and what are their privacy settings? Can I get informed consent? How much information is really required, right? So if I say, here's a new pill I'd like you to have, what amount of information do you need to be really giving informed consent? Is it the side effects that happen 15% of the time or more, the 3 things? Is it the 10 things that happen 5% of the time or more? Or is it the 1,000 things that can happen once every 1,000 cases? So how much information do you need to really give informed consent? And then what about the capacity of the person? A person with some short-term memory problems, there's no way they could possibly remember 1,000 potential side effects. So if they're not quite capable, or what degree of capacity do they need to have to be able to really give informed consent to support their autonomy? The next issue, of course, is honesty, and it's kind of, you're sort of probably wondering, well, why are we talking about honesty? But it is the kind of piece where a car salesman would be a good example, right? This is a great car. It goes fast. It looks nice. The seats are comfortable. But do we need to tell them that we've turned back the odometer 100,000 kilometers? So what you omit to say, right, can affect the person. So this goes back to how much information should we share? Can we overbalance the good and minimize the bad? So honesty is part of it. Next, of course, is privacy and data identification. So if we have a door sensor that transmits data open, closed, and someone hacks into the line and sees open, closed, there's not a lot of information there. A, they don't know where the data is coming from. B, they don't know which, even if they could figure out what house it came from, they wouldn't know which door the sensor was on. So it's really very little loss of privacy. In contrast, of course, to a video camera that might have real-time images of the person, what they're doing, where they're doing it, etc. So data identification matters. And of course, a stick figure is more private than the full video. Next is what I would call trade-off. And that is that, I mean, when we think about it, everything we do has a trade-off. If I spend $100 on a pair of shoes, it means I can't spend that $100 on another piece of clothing, or on food, or on going to see a movie. So everything we do, it really is a kind of a trade-off. So in this case, technology will be a trade-off. So if I have a choice of moving into a retirement home where there's more people that are going to be able to keep an eye on me and keep me safe, and if I fall, someone will find me faster, versus staying at home with technology, now I might be trading off some of my independence, in the sense that now I've got a machine in my house, but I'm able to stay autonomous, making my own decision and aging in place. So trade-off, I think, is an important thing. Every time we Google something, there's a trade-off. It's very convenient, but Google also knows exactly what we're doing. So that converts into issues of public policy. And the first is access to the technology. I'm fortunate I can afford to have an Amazon smart home in my home, but I know that other people can't afford it. So if this technology becomes an important way of providing care and support, who pays? Should this become something that's part of the home care suite of services? Location matters. We know that downtown we have great bandwidth. It's not the same in rural communities and First Nations. And so how do you make sure that everyone gets equal access when the infrastructure isn't there? And the other component of access is the ability to use. So not everyone has the same level of comfort using apps on a smartphone. And so if you want access, you also have to provide some kind of education and make sure that the technology is as simple to use as possible. Design of technology. As you know, most of the people writing the software for the technology we have today are somewhere between 25 and 35 years old. And their perspective is that maybe that aging is a condition that needs to be fixed. So they're saying aging is bad, falling is bad, technology is there to solve that problem. And that's not necessarily how some of us would be viewing it, as a more supportive view of it. And again, the design of it, the interface, the complication factor are really important. Next is AI and database inclusion. So technology is very ageist. So if we take software that recognizes faces. Okay, so there's a lot of companies that do facial recognition. And what you need to do is you need to train your algorithms on real images. So where do you get images? Let's say you go to Facebook and you take 13,000 faces from Facebook, and then you train the machine to recognize happy and sad and young and old, etc. So if you decide, for the sake of argument, that we're going to divide those 13,000 people into 3 groups, equal-sized groups, we might have one group that's aged 15 to 30. Then we'll have a next group that's going to be aged 31 to 50. And then to have all the groups the same size, the 50 to 90 age group will be the last group. Now, you can tell me if you think that a sad 51-year-old looks the same as a sad 82-year-old. There is just not enough data on older adults commonly available to train the systems to be able to detect the things we want to detect specifically for older adults. So the whole basis of AI and databases, we have to be very careful that they're inclusive of the people for whom the technology that we're designing is meant to be. System control, if you ask older adults, one of the most important things is being able to turn off the technology when they don't want it to be on. As I mentioned earlier, we have Amazon throughout our house, and I am quite happy to be able to turn off the volume in our bedrooms at certain times. So the next issue, and this is non-trivial, is who's responsible for the data in a smart home? So is it the sensor company? Absolutely. The sensor company is responsible to make sure the sensor is detecting what it is meant to detect. But after that, they're not really responsible, because then it goes to a handoff to the data transmission company, the Teluses, the Bells. They are responsible to make sure that what goes in comes out at the other end intact. So if it's open, on the other end, it still says open. That's good. And then they hand it off to some storage facility, so large databases that will store this data, and they need to make sure that they're storing it intact. Then there's the analytics company that's going to analyze that. They've developed software to convert the data into information. They own that part of the process. Then the data goes back to a home care provider in a format that they can say, uh-oh, this person didn't open the fridge today at all. We better go check on them. So here's 4 groups of people. They own bits of the process, but who really owns the data? Who's responsible? You could argue each one of them is, but what if there's 10 different sensor companies making sensors in your home? Who's responsible for the data? Non-trivial discussion. And more importantly, who's responsible if the correct information is not acted on, right? If everything's working perfectly and 10 people are notified that Mrs. Jones is lying on the floor, but no one goes to see her, who's responsible? Who is, right? Because it's potentially multiple people. The next issue for public policy is to keep differentiating health data from wellness data. As you know, a blood pressure device that's approved by Health Canada will need to have high reliability, whereas wellness data, a thing on my phone that looks at my pulse through my watch, is going to be not so precise. So what is it? Are we monitoring health? Are we monitoring wellness? Where does the supportive smart home fit on that spectrum? Redundancy is really important because bad things happen to technology from time to time. And then standards are important. If the sensors that we have in our home don't communicate with the hub because they are speaking different languages, of course, that's a huge problem. And just to remind everyone, on July 8th, we had 22, we had a massive catastrophic data event, and millions of Canadians didn't have phones or internet service. Can you imagine if there were even just thousands of smart supportive homes that only had Rogers as their source of information? And quickly to talk about the future, we can expect that over time we'll get additional new sensors, but also we'll be using older sensors differently. So let's take that $2 temperature sensor, and we want to measure water use. What if we stuck it on a pipe? Cold water will make the sensor go cold, hot water will make the sensor go hot. So now we have actually a water use, possibly hygiene activity, using a sensor differently. Data fusion is when we take multiple sensors and we bring that information together to increase our chances of having the right information. So if I only rely on a bed sensor to know if someone is in bed, that will give me good data as long as the person doesn't roll up on one part of the bed where the sensor doesn't see it and we think, oh, the person's out of bed, but really they're still in bed. If we have a second set of sensors in the room, let's say motion sensors, now if we check in the bed and there's no one there and there's motion in the room, well, now we can say, yep, they've gotten up with higher reliability. If they've just moved in bed off the sensor, there's no motion in the room, now we go, oh, we're not sure what's going on. So we can improve precision with more sensors. We do most of our work retroactively. We collect data, we look at it. Subsequently, of course, to be a supportive smart home, all this has to be done in real time. So there's a lot of work to be done to do that. Scale, we're not ready yet to do tens of thousands of people in Ottawa at the same time. We need to figure out scale. Partnerships are really important. Users have to be a key part of the puzzle. Industry, researchers, governments are other parts. We have to keep improving our interface for people with vision and hearing difficulties, arthritis, Parkinson's disease. Technology adoption is not obvious. We need to keep working on that. System dependability, as I mentioned, needs to be there. Privacy and security, we need to keep thinking and working on those issues as well. On a lighter note, here's a supportive smart home cartoon I love. Another beer, please, Hal. He says to the fridge says, I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that. The bathroom scale and the hall mirror are reporting disturbing flab anomalies. And so here, we're taking different sensors, fusing the data and having an action. So I hope you've been able to see some of the elements of a supportive smart home. I've tried to show a couple of conditions associated with aging that could be supported. We've talked about ethics and public policy. I'm going to shamelessly advertise a book that we recently published on this topic, and much of this presentation sort of comes from that work. And I also want to remind people that we're always looking for volunteers at the Bruyère Research Institute. We're doing work on supportive smart homes, obviously driving and diagnosing cognitive decline. We have projects in all of these areas running right now. And while, of course, we also look for people with functional and cognitive decline, we do need the healthy controls to contrast against. So we're always looking to recruit more people for studies, and I've left some information here. If you'd like to volunteer, we'd love to have you. And that's the end of the presentation, and I thank you for your attention.
Thanks very much, Frank. That was quite a presentation. I'm sure most of us had no idea what was going on in Ottawa in terms of supportive smart homes. We'll go right into questions now, and I'll let people know that we'll likely go to about 11:15 in order to get to quite a number of the ones that we've had already come in. The first is, are any of the tech companies whose tech you're talking about paying for promotional or other influence in this seminar?
Okay, that's a very good question. That's a great ethical question. No, no one. I'm not getting any funding from any of these companies. I can say that I do have relationships with these companies. I am on the board of directors of Esprit AI. The other company I mentioned, Ultimview, is a company that we've just worked with. They've funded some of our student researchers, but excellent question. Yeah.
Okay, another question. You did mention how we might become involved in your research, which is very helpful because I suspect a lot of listeners and viewers will be interested in that. But is one of your goals to have a package of technological tools for caregivers to purchase to help monitor their loved ones who want to continue independent living?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously that's been the goal for the last 20 years is that, when we started, we certainly had no idea of the complexity of this, and we've certainly gotten a lot smarter over the last 20 years. And that's why after 19 years, we wrote a book about it, because we didn't want everyone to have to keep starting from scratch in the thinking. But yeah, this is really complex. And I mean, the goal certainly is, and in my view, the way I would see it is that eventually we would have a platform that people would be able to either purchase, or it would be included in future homes just automatically. It would be just like every house has heating, every house will have a smart home platform. And on that, then you would activate or purchase sensors depending on the thing that needs support, right? So someone who has cognitive issues may not need to have their mobility gait rate monitored, right? So, or someone who has no memory problems we might not worry about the ingredients going into a recipe. So we'd want to customize it based on individual needs. So I would see it as being a platform, and then you would put the modules on it that you need. We're still pretty far away from that right now. The best you can get is sort of, I mean, you can get the Amazon and Google smart technology, but it's only smart in that it's interactive. It doesn't recognize activities, and it can't give you feedback at this point. So, but if you got one of those platforms and we were able to make them senior friendly and supportive, that probably will be the next iteration. But that's certainly the goal.
Okay. There are two questions relating to data, and they're related. Just wondering if this collection of data will be repeated for every case or every individual that requires such technology, and how often is the data being analyzed?
Yeah, so I mean so those are all the variables, right? So when at the beginning we start with, we want to look at each person as a unique individual. So I might never get up at night to go to the bathroom, at least not right now, but in 10 years I might be getting up 2 times a night. So we want it to be individual, but we probably also still want to have some kind of societal norms, if you like. So some, means, so that we can start off with, the average 80-year-old might get up once or twice a night to go to the bathroom, right? So we do want to have population-based data, but I think for the purposes of really personalized analysis, we'd want the individual's data. The analysis, I mean, that's the big challenge, right? Do we analyze it locally and we provide feedback right away? Do we analyze it centrally with big computers like IBM would have, right? That where they would do the data analytics for us. I don't know the answer to that, but there are things that can be done quickly locally. There are complex things that would require much more processing power and that would need to be done more centrally. Hopefully it's done eventually in real time. Like I said, right now we're collecting data and then looking at it afterwards, but that's not helpful. Telling someone, a month later that, oh yeah, we saw that you fell on September 2nd. We want to be able to do that in real time.
Okay. Are there any homes in Ottawa that are equipped as supportive smart homes apart from, let's say, your clinical study? How much of this is actually being used right now?
Yeah, so this is very early days. So apart from my conflict of interest with Esprit AI, they have a business on monitoring homes. They focus particularly on people with cognitive impairment. And so they have, at this point, a number of sensors that they combine and with artificial intelligence to create alarms for family members. So it exists. It's early days. I'm sure there's other companies as well, but it is very much early days. And yeah, I would say, there is a lot of customization that happens. I know my own patients will set up technology combinations. So for instance, we know that Amazon will not respond unless you say, hey, what's her name? Can you do this thing for me? So what one family did is they put a nanny cam into the room, and when the person, their loved one, sat down on the rocking chair, the camera was triggered. It notified the family. The family then spoke into the speaker of the nanny cam to trigger a video call with Amazon. So they were able to have a video call whenever their mom sat there, but they had to create their own sort of smart loop to get it to work. So I think there's a lot of customization that's happening already in Ottawa. We have a lot of high-tech people, so people are playing with it. But yeah, it's limited. It's early days, but that's why we're talking about it.
Thank you. There are two related questions now. Can we volunteer even if we currently have no serious issues? Would it be beneficial to anyone? And can you talk about diversity in your work and fully reflecting Canadian society?
Right. So the first question is absolutely. Like I mentioned, we always need healthy people first so that we can describe what normal healthy variation is. So let's say we're doing a memory test. We've created a new memory test that uses speech recognition and tracks eye movements. And we think it's very cool. The problem is it's brand new, so it's never been tested. So we need healthy people to use this technology first so we can say, okay, healthy people, this is the bell curve of their data. Then we'll take people with mild cognitive impairment or dementia, and we'll test them, and then we'll start differentiating, what the variables are that distinguish healthy and non-healthy. And so, absolutely, we need healthy people on the driving simulator. Right? We can't talk about what's not normal until we describe what's normal. So we need healthy older adults to drive on our driving simulators so that we can say this is normal behavior for healthy older adults, before we can use it and now say, here's characteristics associated with mild cognitive impairment or dementia. So that was the first part of the question. The second part was diversity. So we absolutely try to, recruit as broad a population as we can for our projects. It's not easy recruiting people with cognitive impairment. It's easier to recruit healthy people, but even in healthy people, just by nature of how our systems work, we do get predominantly Caucasians, healthy older Caucasians. Sometimes we recruit intentionally. We go, okay, we're not going to take any more men until we get at least 5 more women for driving, for instance, or whatever. So we will do that selectively, but it's harder to recruit minorities, I'll be honest. So yeah, so we're certainly happy for anyone that has ways of increasing our minority involvement. We're more than happy to work with that.
How do you foresee, and this is a little bit sort of future that you discussed at the end of the presentation, how do you see that SSH might help with cognitive decline other than the monitoring you've already talked about?
Yeah, so I mean, and remember, the monitoring is only the beginning. The supportive part is really where I see this going. So we've already tested technology that is for nighttime for people living with dementia. So an older adult living with dementia at 2 in the morning, they feel pressure on the bladder, they get up, they want to go to the bathroom. They might not remember where the light switch is, and so they're at risk of tripping. They might not remember where the bathroom is. So what we've done is automatically, as soon as the person gets out of bed, the light goes on. The light goes on in the hall, the light goes on in the bathroom so that they can find the way to the bathroom. And then hopefully they go reverse order back to bed, they lie down, and then the system goes back to sleep. Let's say they go into the kitchen because they say, oh, it's 2 o'clock. This is when I have my snack. It's 2 in the morning. So now we have a little speaker in the kitchen that says, honey, it's the middle of the night. Please come back to bed. We use the voice of the spouse or a family member for familiarity. Hopefully they listen to that. They go back to bed. All is well. Let's say now that it's 2 o'clock and they go, oh, I think it's time for my walk. And it's the middle of winter. They forget that it's winter. They don't get the clothes they need, and bad things can happen. So as soon as they open the door, an alarm goes off to wake the person, their caregiver, so that we have a supportive smart home. This is just one example. The other examples, of course, that we're working on are like meal preparation. So like I said earlier, if you forget the water and the potatoes, the system would immediately give you that cue and hopefully prevent bad things from happening. The system might remind you to do some cognitive exercises. Hey, you haven't done any Sudokus today. Did you want to do a puzzle or whatever, right? So for sure, on the cognitive side, this is all about maintaining their independence at home for as long as possible with queuing as part of the business.
Here's a question that I think relates more to the situation in general. If one has no family members in the city, who gets notified if something happens? Who comes to the aid of a person in trouble?
Excellent question. And so this is where we need to be able to customize any solution, right? So if, we've done trials where explicitly the older adults has said, I don't want my daughter notified. I want my neighbor notified because, well, for whatever reason, right? So we can set things up, right? Assuming someone has a smartphone, we can send them a message using this technology. So it could be a neighbor, it could be a family member, it could be a partner of any kind, it could be home care, right? So it really depends. And this goes back to sort of the ethics, which is, this is your data. Who else do you want this data to go to? We'll go to you first. Let's say you can't respond. Then who do you want us to go to? It could be the neighbor. It could be 911, right? If someone has fallen and no one is available to help them get up, maybe we call the police and the fire trucks in, and then they break down the door, right? So it really is going to be customizable, hopefully, and depending on the person. But great question.
Now, getting back to people who might want to volunteer, particularly in this age of webinars and remote working, can volunteers work remotely from their home in your projects?
Right, so that's a little bit more difficult. I'll say that right now, that's not possible because the technology we're testing is still in its raw form, and the raw form, we need to have it in a controlled environment. So let's take the driving simulation. There is a $300,000 machine. We can't bring it to your house. You have to come to our house to do that driving data collection. The smart diagnostic tools, they're still in a very fragile form. They require specific lighting. They require you to sit a certain distance from the device. We're still in early days in these. So right now, all of our technology is tested either at Carleton or Bruyère. So yeah, unfortunately, right now we would need that kind of movement. We do smart home testing when it gets to the next level. We do a testing in people's homes, and those examples that I've given you are real examples. But right now, we don't have any projects that are running in remotely, but we will get back to those as well.
All right, thank you. We have time perhaps for one more question. Those who analyze the data that you get, what are their qualifications? Are they volunteers? Are they scientists? Are they doctors?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So right now, we have the research team, which are the researchers like myself. So I'm a physician. We have, like I said, engineering researchers. We have industrial design researchers, healthcare management researchers. So we design the studies. We monitor the the evolution of the projects. Then we have research assistants that do a lot of what I would call the technical work. So if it's installing the system in someone's home, if it's setting up the person in front of a computer to make sure they're the right distance, they're doing the right thing, that the technology is working. So we have research assistants. And then we have usually graduate students supervised by us that do the data analytics. So they'll write the algorithms to analyze the data, and they'll make the interpretation. And again, this is after the fact. This is research, so it's after the fact. If we do go to real time, so let's take the example of Esprit, they have data analytics. So the software does the work itself, and it's supervised by the company. So it's the engineers in the company that supervise the data analytics and that manage the data collection, the security, and everything. So that's in the hands of the company in the real-time situation.
Perhaps we'll slip in one more question. Some of us may be caregivers amongst the viewers today. How do you convince our patients or the people we're working with that volunteering is actually a good thing, particularly if they have a fear of technology, a fear of the potential invasive nature?
Yeah, I mean that's the $1 million question, right? Is how do you recruit for this kind of work? So all I can say is that we try to give examples, right? Like we used to have a rotary telephone, and now we have phones that aren't connected to anything except when we plug them in at night, and they do 1,000 times as many things. Well, to get there from the rotary phone to the smartphone, we had to do experiments, we had to trial things, we had to learn about the technology, and that requires research. And research requires participants to help us so that we can get the first few data points so we can understand how this technology works, how it doesn't work, to make it better. And so research is one of those altruistic things where we ask you to give some of your time so that we can make a better future together. And I mean that works for some people, and for people that have a lot of physical challenges, they're just trying to survive, and we understand that that's not in their capabilities. And cognitively impaired people, it's challenging as well, because of course we can't explain it all in so many words. And this goes back to the informed consent, and where then we work with family members that are involved and that do have the best interest of their loved ones in mind, and we work with them if research is something that's possible in that case or not. But yeah, it's a challenge. I mean, we have a number of trials running now, and some of them we've had a lot of difficulty recruiting for, and yes, sometimes we get lucky and we have a cool new machine and everyone wants to try it, right? So we never know exactly how it's going to work out.
Well, thank you very much. That's all the time we have. I want to thank you for your informative and helpful presentation, Dr. Knoefel, and to our audience for their participation and questions. Remember to look for our follow-up email. Several participants have asked about either the research or how to contact you or how to volunteer. So this email will include information on how to access the recording of today's session, as well as contact information for our presenter. And please remember that you can invite non-members to attend our webinars and try us out as a guest. To register for upcoming webinars, please visit the Ottawa branch website at naferottawa.com. Thank you again. We hope to see you at our next webinar, a fitness session with Meg Stickle-Croker on June 27th. Good morning.
Bye, everyone.